In the shadows of ancient Indian literature, there exists a figure both fascinating and terrifying, the Vishakanya, the Poison Maiden. These are not goddesses, not demons in the traditional sense, but something far more complex and terrifying. Women transformed into living weapons, their very essence saturated with venom. These women, fed poison from birth until their very touch becomes deadly, represent one of the most intriguing concepts in Indian mythology and historical texts. Welcome to our exploration of the Vishakanya. If you find this journey into ancient lore compelling, please subscribe and follow our channel to support our work in bringing these lesser-known stories to light. Now, let us begin our descent into the world of the Poison Maiden. The Vishakanya is not born but made, a crucial distinction that separates her from other supernatural beings in Indian mythology. The term itself comes from two Sanskrit words, Visha, meaning poison, and Kanya, meaning maiden or young woman. The creation of a Vishakanya is a deliberate, methodical process that begins in infancy. According to various texts in Indian literature, the process involves selecting young girls, often from birth or early childhood, and administering small doses of poison to them over many years. The Arthashastra, the ancient Indian treatise on statecraft attributed to Kautilya or Chanakya, provides some of the earliest textual evidence for this practice. In this text, the Vishakanya appears as a weapon of political assassination, a tool in the arsenal of kings and ministers. The poison most commonly associated with their creation is derived from various sources: snake venom, plant-based toxins, and mineral poisons. The gradual process of immunization allows these young women to survive increasingly potent doses. Over years of this terrible conditioning, their bodies become living vessels of poison. Their breath carries venom, their saliva contains death, and their skin secretes toxins that can kill through mere contact. The first Vishakanya, according to some traditions, traces back to the courts of ancient Indian kingdoms during the period known as the Mahajanapadas, around the 6th century BCE. However, no single text identifies one specific woman as the original Vishakanya. Instead, the practice appears to have been known across multiple kingdoms simultaneously, suggesting either independent development or a shared knowledge that predates our earliest written records. The Arthashastra contains perhaps the most explicit references to Vishakanyas. In Book 14, which deals with secret means and treachery, Kautilya describes the use of poisoned maidens as instruments of assassination. The text instructs that these women should be trained not only in the art of poison, but also in music, dance, and conversation, making them irresistible to their intended targets. When a king or nobleman becomes intimate with such a woman, he meets his death through the poison transferred during their encounter. The Kathasaritsagra, the 11th century collection of Indian legends compiled by Somadeva, contains multiple references to Vishakanyas. In this vast ocean of stories, the Poison Maiden appears in various tales, sometimes as an assassin, other times as a tragic figure caught between her deadly nature and human desires. One story describes a Vishakanya sent to kill a prince, only to fall in love with him herself, creating an impossible situation where her very existence threatens the one she loves. The Greek accounts from the time of Alexander the Great's invasion of India in 326 BCE mention gifts of beautiful women sent to the conqueror. Some historians have speculated these may have been Vishakanyas, sent as a final defense against the foreign invader. While direct evidence for this interpretation remains debatable, it demonstrates how deeply the concept of the Poison Maiden penetrated the political consciousness of ancient India. The Vishakanya possesses powers that make her one of the most feared figures in ancient Indian warfare and politics. Her primary ability is, of course, the poison that permeates her entire being. Unlike other poisoners who must rely on external substances, the Vishakanya herself is the weapon. This makes detection nearly impossible and defense extraordinarily difficult. Her breath carries toxic vapors that can sicken or kill those who inhale them in close quarters. Her saliva, should it mix with food or drink or be transferred through a kiss, delivers a fatal dose. Her skin secretes poison through perspiration, making even casual physical contact dangerous. In intimate encounters, the transfer of bodily fluids ensures certain death for her partner. The Vishakanya is most powerful in situations of intimacy and trust. Her training in the arts, music, dance, poetry, and conversation allows her to gain access to protected individuals whom armed assassins could never approach. Kings in their chambers, protected by guards and tasters, remain vulnerable to a beautiful woman who has won their confidence. This ability to bypass all conventional security measures makes the Vishakanya an unparalleled assassination tool. Some texts suggest that Vishakanyas possess an enhanced resistance not only to the poisons they have consumed, but to other toxins as well. This general immunity would make them difficult to kill through poisoning, adding another layer to their deadly reputation. Certain accounts describe Vishakanyas as having an unnatural beauty, perhaps enhanced by the strange effects of poison on their systems, or perhaps simply a necessary trait selected during their initial recruitment as children. This beauty serves a functional purpose. It disarms suspicion and attracts targets. The texts vary on whether Vishakanyas retain full awareness of their deadly nature. Some portray them as willing participants, trained assassins who embrace their role. Others depict them as tragic figures, aware that they can never experience normal human contact without bringing death. This latter interpretation adds a psychological dimension to their power, the knowledge that they are forever isolated from ordinary human connection. While the Vishakanya herself is a human creation rather than a supernatural being, various texts associate her with demonic forces and dark practices. The very process of her creation, the deliberate poisoning of a child over many years, carries overtones of black magic and forbidden knowledge in many narratives. Some traditions connect Vishakanyas with the worship of darker deities and the practice of left-hand path tantric rituals. These associations likely stem from the transgressive nature of their creation and use. To deliberately transform a human being into a living weapon requires a willingness to cross moral boundaries that many ancient texts characterize as demonic. Certain texts describe Vishakanyas as being consecrated to specific purposes through dark rituals. Before being sent on their missions, they might undergo ceremonies intended to strengthen their poison, ensure their success, or bind them to their task. These rituals, described in fragmentary references across various texts, often involve nocturnal ceremonies, the invocation of destructive forces, and offerings made at cremation grounds. The association between Vishakanyas and asuras, or demonic beings, appears in some narratives, though the connection is usually metaphorical rather than literal. The texts describe their work as asuri karma, which means demonic action, not because Vishakanyas are demons themselves, but because the practice of creating and deploying them represents a corruption of the natural order. Some accounts describe Vishakanyas consorting with practitioners of dark arts, tantrics who work with poison, death, and transformation. These practitioners might serve as the actual creators of Vishakanyas, possessing the knowledge of which poisons to use, in what quantities, and in what combinations to achieve the desired result without killing the subject during the conditioning process. In certain regional traditions, Vishakanyas are said to be more potent during specific times, particularly during the dark fortnight of the lunar month when malevolent forces grow stronger, or during inauspicious astrological configurations. Whether this represents actual increased toxicity, or simply propitious timing for assassination attempts, remains ambiguous in the source texts. One of the most famous legends involving a Vishakanya appears in stories connected to Chandragupta Maurya, the founder of the Mauryan Empire. According to these accounts, Chanakya, his minister and mentor, became aware that enemies had sent a Vishakanya to assassinate the young emperor. In some versions, Chanakya himself had been feeding Chandragupta small doses of poison in his food as a protective measure, making the emperor partially immune. When the Vishakanya arrived at court disguised as a dancer or courtesan, Chanakya recognized her true nature and prevented the assassination. Another version of this story takes a darker turn. In this telling, Chanakya discovered the Vishakanya's presence only after she had already gained access to the emperor. To save Chandragupta, Chanakya found a condemned criminal and arranged for this man to spend a night with the Vishakanya, knowing it would result in his death. The criminal's death served as proof of her nature, and she was subsequently executed or driven from the kingdom. The Katha preserves several tales of Vishakanyas. In one story, a king receives a beautiful woman as a gift from a neighboring ruler. The woman is extraordinarily beautiful and accomplished in all arts. However, the king's wise minister grows suspicious of this too-perfect gift from a known enemy. He tests the woman by having her breathe upon a bird in a cage. When the bird immediately dies, her nature becomes clear, and she confesses to being a Vishakanya sent to kill the king. Another tale from the same collection describes a prince who falls in love with a mysterious woman he meets in a garden. Despite warnings from his companions, he pursues her. Only the intervention of a sage who recognizes her as a Vishakanya saves the prince's life. In this version, the Vishakanya herself weeps at being discovered, revealing the tragic dimension of her existence. She desires love and human connection, but can never achieve it without bringing death. Some Buddhist texts contain stories of Vishakanyas who achieve redemption through encountering enlightened beings. In these narratives, a Vishakanya sent to kill a monk or Buddhist teacher instead finds herself transformed by exposure to Dharma teachings. Though she remains physically poisonous, she renounces her role as an assassin and sometimes becomes a supporter of the Buddhist community, using her unique nature to protect rather than destroy. Regional folklore across India contains localized versions of Vishakanya stories. In some traditions from Kerala and Karnataka, Vishakanyas are associated with specific temples or sacred groves, places where their spirits are said to reside after death. These locations become sites of both fear and reverence, where the memory of the Poison Maiden serves as a warning about the corruption of innocence and the price of political ambition. Beyond their role as weapons and assassins, many texts emphasize the fundamentally tragic nature of the Vishakanya's existence. She is created through a process she cannot consent to, beginning in childhood before understanding is possible. Her entire life is shaped toward a single purpose: to kill, and her very body makes normal human relationships impossible. The texts describe the isolation inherent in being a Vishakanya. She cannot share meals with others without risking their lives. She cannot offer comfort through touch. She cannot experience love or intimacy without delivering death. This complete separation from normal human experience makes her a figure of profound tragedy in many narratives. Some accounts describe Vishakanyas as being kept in isolation during their training and preparation, further compounding their separation from ordinary human society. They become inhabitants of a liminal space, human in form and consciousness, but excluded from human connection by their deadly nature. The question of what becomes of a Vishakanya after she completes her mission rarely receives a clear answer in the texts. Some accounts suggest they are executed after their use, too dangerous to be allowed to live once their purpose is fulfilled. Others describe them returning to their creators to await another assignment. A few narratives allow for the possibility of redemption or transformation, though these remain exceptions rather than the rule. The question of whether Vishakanyas actually existed in historical reality remains subject to scholarly debate. No archaeological evidence directly confirms the practice of creating poison maidens. No historical records provide unambiguous proof that any specific assassination was carried out by a Vishakanya. However, the widespread presence of the concept across multiple textual traditions, Hindu, Buddhist, and Jain sources all mention Vishakanyas, suggests that something underlies the legend. The consistency of the core concept across diverse sources argues against pure literary invention. Modern toxicological knowledge confirms that humans can develop tolerance to certain poisons through gradual exposure. This process, known as Mithridatism after King Mithridates VI of Pontus, who supposedly practiced it, demonstrates that the basic principle behind creating a Vishakanya has grounding in biological reality. Whether this process could be taken to the extreme described in the texts, where mere contact could kill, remains doubtful from a scientific perspective. Some historians suggest that the Vishakanya may have been more psychological warfare than actual practice. The fear of poison maidens could cause paranoia among rulers and nobles, making them suspicious of beautiful women and gifts from rivals. Whether or not Vishakanyas actually existed, the belief in their existence could serve political purposes and influence behavior. The texts themselves often present Vishakanyas as rare and extraordinary, rather than common. This rarity in the narratives might reflect actual historical scarcity, if the practice existed at all. The difficulty and expense of creating a Vishakanya, years of careful poisoning, extensive training in arts and seduction, would make them available only to the most powerful and wealthy, used only in the most critical situations. The Arthashastra's inclusion of Vishakanyas in its discussion of statecraft reveals how ancient Indian political theorists thought about power, warfare, and the protection of the state. Kautilya presents the Vishakanya as one tool among many, alongside conventional armies, spies, propaganda, and economic sanctions, available to a ruler. The text categorizes the use of Vishakanyas under upamsu or clandestine warfare, methods that operate in secrecy rather than open confrontation. This placement reveals an understanding that certain political objectives cannot be achieved through conventional means and require approaches that work in shadows and through deception. The strategic value of a Vishakanya lies in her ability to accomplish what armies cannot. When a problematic ruler is too well protected for conventional assassination, when open warfare would be too costly, or when deniability is essential, the Vishakanya offers a solution. Her very existence as a concept forces rulers to consider threats that come not from obvious enemies, but from unexpected sources. The defensive implications are equally significant. A ruler aware of Vishakanyas must be suspicious of gifts from rivals, cautious about accepting beautiful strangers into their court, and wary of intimate encounters. This necessary paranoia could itself become debilitating, degrading the quality of life and the ability to govern effectively. The Vishakanya stands as one of the most complex and troubling figures in ancient Indian literature and thought. She is victim and weapon, human and monster, a being created through cruelty and deployed for deadly purpose. The texts preserve her story as a warning about the extremes to which political ambition can drive human behavior, and the tragedy that results when people become tools rather than ends in themselves. Whether the Vishakanya existed in historical reality or remained purely a concept in fear, her presence in the texts speaks to deep anxieties about power, poison, betrayal, and the corruption of innocence. She represents the ultimate intimate betrayal, death delivered through desire, destruction disguised as beauty, venom hidden in what should be nurturing. Thank you for joining us on this exploration of the Vishakanya, the Poison Maiden of ancient India. If you found this journey into forgotten lore valuable, please share it with others who appreciate the deeper mysteries of history and mythology. We invite you to join us again as we continue exploring the shadows and secrets of ancient Indian traditions. Until next time, may your pursuit of knowledge be both safe and enlightening.